Hello and welcome to another episode of Spiritually Incorrect. I'm your host, Seth Hart. Joined with me is Jonathan Lyonhart.
You're a host. You're one of the hosts. You're not the host, Seth.
I am the host. Whose idea was it to have a podcast? Yours or mine?
It was the Lord's. We just received his vision.
Well, the Lord gave it to me, therefore making me the host
and
of
you
the divine
gave it
revelation.
to me. And you gave it to me. So whose is it now? Is it mine? Does
Your
it cease
sub-host.
being yours?
Your sub-host. Yes. Sub-host.
Okay. Well, hello and welcome to the Spiritually Incorrect podcast. I'm the host, Jonathan Lyonhart.
That was
Here also
so
with me today is
subpar.
Seth Hart.
That is so subpar. This is why I do these intros.
Hello and welcome to the Spiritually Incorrect podcast. Today we have blah, 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 Jonathan.
You're trying.
And Seth. Seth's there too. Like Robin. He's my sidekick. He's in a little sidecar.
You are
Like
literally
that one
the
Indiana
guest
Jones
today,
has
and you're
in
complaining.
The Last Crusade. Am I the guest?
Yes. Yeah.
I thought it was more of a mutual thing. Okay, so I'm the guest. All right, if I'm the guest, then please introduce me and let them know my credentials, Seth.
Your
I'd love
name
to hear you
is
call me Doctor.
Jonathan Lyonhart. The most prestigious thing that you
Doctor
have.
Jonathan Lyonhart.
The most prestigious thing that you have is not your doctorate. It is the fact that you've been invited on to co-host a podcast with Seth Hart, the Spiritually Incorrect podcast. You have your
Come
PhD.
on, I actually...
What?
Okay, go ahead.
You have
No,
your PhD
sorry.
from Cambridge. You are a professor at University of Jamestown, and not the cool Jamestown, the North Dakota Jamestown. Slowly
would you point
crawling
that
your
out?
way back to Canada, slowly but surely to your homeland.
Okay, that was at least accurate. That
True.
that last part. I am trying to be... I'm as close to Canada as I can possibly be, and I literally have an escape route to get there within 3 hours. I know exactly what road I will take.
Exactly.
So,
See,
not
the
even
fact that you
joking.
think that. The fact that you would even have to think that. So, Jonathan, what are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about morality. Right and wrong, good and evil. Is there such a thing as right and wrong? Are those just social constructs, things we came up with, or are those grounded in something higher? Do we need an absolute, an ultimate, who is goodness itself? And is that ultimate absolute God?
And you might
Or
think it's
can we be
ironic
moral
that
without God?
the Spiritually Incorrect podcast hosts would dare so much as speak about morality, given our track record. But nevertheless, we're going to give it a crack.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people say Tolkien doesn't understand good and evil because he's just too good, right? And so you have to get into the darkness and the dirtiness to understand the gray and the dark. So you could argue, Seth, that we're experts. We supplement the other side of things, even though I think Tolkien actually is way better than Martin
Adam and Eve
when it
come
comes
to
to
knowledge
evil,
of good and
personally.
evil? How did Adam and Eve come to knowledge of good and evil, John?
They tasted the fruits.
They tasted the fruits. And not only...
And we have tasted, and they are juicy and delicious.
And even as the older we get, we even are starting to look like fruit. We have the same shape as most fruit.
Pear-shaped, that's right,
Pear-shaped.
and slightly wrinkled with a few dents in places that shouldn't have them.
Slightly rotten fruit. Yes. Well, welcome to the podcast.
It's good to see you. You're looking good in your new room. Your new is this your office or is this your house? I love that would be behind you because then your head would be right in the middle where the fingers touch, almost as if you were the meeting point, the mediator, the bridge between God's finger and Adam's.
That's the point.
Like your head is the bridge between God and humanity.
Remember
and
that?
I love that you would see yourself that way.
Well, remember how we just had a discussion how you said the podcast is given to us by God? So yeah. Like
all of creation is given to us by God. So all of it, including and especially me. But
all right, so I have here on the notes that you sent me for this episode, it says Jonathan shamelessly framed the episode about morality chapter from his book, The Journey of God.
Yay! I am going to shamelessly frame it around my book, The Journey of God. So in my book, The Journey of God, I have a section on morality, whether it's objective and whether we need to believe in God or not, or, whether God needs to exist for things like goodness to be real things. And so not solely for the sake of self-plugging, an awkward term when you think about it, But also for the fact that I that's kind of how I frame the moral question, is the way that I framed it in my book. That's going to be the framework we follow today. So we're going to basically follow the outline of the book, asking the questions as the book did, and really get into this nitty gritty about whether we need God to be good or not. So,
I love your brutal honesty on this little outline sheet that you sent me. Number one, the reasons you want to do this, because it provides an outline for our discussion, and number two, because you enjoy shamelessly plugging yourself. Also a very awkward way to phrase that.
Well, I think we all would, if you give it a try. And I think, no, you should. What
Let's
are you?
talk
What are
about
you
morality,
about?
John. You clearly are
No, I'm
struggling
talking
here.
about self-promotion. I think people need to have a stronger, firmer sense of self that they present out into the world, Seth. That's what I meant. I don't know where your head goes. Apparently between God and humanity.
So objective morality, John. Tell us about that. What is objective morality?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about, when someone does something wrong, we don't want to just be like, hey, you did something wrong within my social constructs and cultural frame of reference. No, there's something within us that says, you did something wrong, objectively wrong. It's not like I'm just outraged. You violated goodness itself. And I think that's the moral impulse within us, that right and wrong are real things, just as the material world is a real thing. But of course, this has been problematized because as we grow up and encounter more people and cultures and times and places, we realize, wait, my morality has something relative and subjective and culturally relative to it. So is morality objective or not? And that's the question.
And so thanks for coming. That's where we'll leave you today.
Well, this was meant to be more of a discussion, Seth. Come on, participate in the discussion.
So in other words, is there actually a right answer to... I mean, in everything in our culture, we seem to presuppose this. So like when people are pro-life versus pro-choice, there's a sense that one side is going to be right. The common ground shared by both sides in that debate is one side is right.
We might disagree on what is right, but there is a right.
That there is a right or wrong answer there. It isn't just someone's opinion. It's not just like, which is better, chocolate or vanilla? Well, it's whatever, you personally like to do.
No,
there's
chocolate.
Actually a
What's
right
wrong
or wrong answer to these questions. What'd you say?
Yeah, sorry, I keep cutting you off. The objective answer is chocolate. Chocolate is objectively better than vanilla. I'm
not going to disagree with you, but there are people who do.
Subjective. Yeah. So yeah, is it objective? Is it just relative to the human subject, to me and my preferences, or is it actually a fact out there in the object, in the world itself? Is it objectively right or wrong? Is there a standard of goodness?
And where does that come from?
And where does that standard come from?
Yeah,
that's the question.
Yeah, because...
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, because we don't think of... I mean, animals have moral instincts. There's this wonderful video from Franz de Waal of where they give these... Have you seen this video?
No.
Oh, so they give these monkeys...
I don't watch any of the things you send me.
Ah, well, no wonder you struggle keeping up with me in conversation. So they give these monkeys these grapes. Or no, they give these monkeys that like these. They give them a reward for like a food that they for accomplishing a task. They give them some food, but it's like not a very appetizing food. They really want the grapes. So it's like, I don't remember what it is, like bread or something not very tasty. And so they give one a piece of bread for doing a task, and he can see this other monkey in a different cage, and they give this monkey a piece of bread. Well, they do the task again, where they give the first monkey a piece of bread again, but the second monkey they give a grape, which is much better, sweeter. And so when the first monkey sees that, he sees that, takes the food, sees that they're giving them a better one, and throws it at the researchers. Literally throws it and then just starts banging his hand saying, I want my grape. Why does this, he did the same thing. So they have this sense of fairness. Even in like these little monkeys have a sense of fairness. And I asked my students, I said, so they have a morality. Animals have a sense of morality, but can they sin? And I use that language very provocatively because it's a Christian class, a largely Christian class. And the answer is normally no. They have a sense of morality, but it's just instinct. It's just a survival thing. They actually isn't an out there right and wrong for them. like whenever a lion kills a zebra, the lion doesn't murder the zebra. And I use this as an illustration to say, okay, then what makes humans different? What is it about us that we think that our moral instincts aren't just, our moral intuitions aren't just instincts, that they're more than that. They point to something real out there about what's true about good and bad.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I mean, I just got a new dog. And whether that dog has moral instincts or not is a real question because, looking into its eyes, it just kind of feels like it does, doesn't it? But
Depends on the
I
dog.
think it depends on the dog, yeah. But I think maybe a more helpful thing is, does a spider have morality? If a spider bites you, has it done something wrong? Has it sinned? Or is it just doing what spiders do? Or even more extreme, does bacteria have a right and wrong? When bacteria invade and, or
Cause
that kind of
illness.
thing, like, and cause illness, have they done something wrong? And so why would we assume that morality is real for us but not for those things, and where does it begin? These are difficult questions, and why do we think our morality is objective?
So this is wonderful timing because I was actually audiobook listening to a book on the way to work today about a scientist who claims that all of this is just byproducts of evolution, that biology can explain the source of our morality. And in that sense, there really isn't anything out there determining what's right and wrong. There isn't anything true to the statement, it's wrong for a woman to kill her spouse. Because Black Widows do it, but humans typically don't. Typically, fingers crossed. Now, all that to say, when a Black Widow eats a female Black Widow eats her spouse after they mate, nobody thinks, oh, how deeply immoral. That's just a byproduct of the way they've evolved. Humans have evolved differently, but if we had evolved like Black Widows, it would have been perfectly acceptable. So morality is nothing more than a byproduct of the different evolutionary pathways we went down. There you go, John. Problem solved. That's the origin of morality. There's nothing more to it than that.
Yeah, and I think that's an
You've admitted
attempt to
defeat?
explain. No, I think that's an attempt to explain where our moral intuitions come from, but I don't think it can provide a moral foundation for reality itself. So, like, you hear scientists say we can be moral based on atheistic, naturalistic assumptions alone because this is embedded in our biology. And I think maybe you could attempt to explain morality as somehow biologically ingrained, but then it's not really binding. It's not something that really you have to follow any more than a spider has to make webs. We can deny our biology if we want to, and perhaps it's stupid to try to do so, but I don't know if it's immoral to deny your biology. So I think what that is an attempt to do is explain, why do we think we have why do we think there's morality? But I don't think science can actually provide an account for a real moral good and evil universe, because in explaining it, they've explained it away. Because evolution doesn't have a set end goal towards a higher good. Evolution just does what it needs to accommodate your certain circumstances. What is the moral instinct in us? It's, well, our common ancestors with monkeys used to share, the ones that like worked together and were nice to each other lived longer and reproduced better because they had the pack working with them, and so they had more protection, whereas the meaner lone wolf kind of ones went and did their own thing, and so they got killed more often, they had less team support, and this happens long enough, and eventually it ingrains into us this sense that we should be for the team and nice to people, but not because being nice is objectively good, but just because that's what's most conducive for survival of the fittest. And so if that's all that morality is evolution adapting to specific circumstances, it could have adapted differently. What is that wasp that Darwin talks about that burrows its side into its prey?
Oh, yeah, it's like
and
the
then lays
what? Yeah, I know what you're talking
Ichneumonidae or something. It lays its eggs inside of its victims, and then they hatch and eat it from the inside out. And if our circumstances had evolved differently, that could be us and our sense of morality. And if that's all that morality is where biological evolution took you, then I don't think that's an objective foundation for right and wrong and love being better than hate. I think that's, by definition, subjective. I think it means that morality doesn't matter. You can deny it if you want to, because it's not some absolute eternal thing. It's just a relative thing. And if someone wants to take control of the evolutionary process, and I'm going to the Nazis here, like the whole point of the master race was to take control of the evolutionary process. And if they just succeeded and done it for millions of years, then would we still think it was immoral for them to have done that? Probably not. And in which case you'd have nothing higher to appeal to say that it wasn't immoral. It would just be moral now because they would have harnessed biology to make it moral. And if that's all that morality is, then I think morality is nothing.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's not nothing. I think it just means...
It's biological.
Yeah, it's biological, but biology's not nothing. I mean, what's to keep someone from saying, that's all it is? Tough.
Yeah, I think you can go that route. I think you can basically... I think of that as nihilism. I think of that as saying there is no inherent objective meaning to reality. There's no right or wrong. Your life is not more or less evil than the serial killers. Or, I mean, that's an extreme example, but I think it's true. If there is nothing more than biology, we can go with our biology or against it because there's no moral code saying you need to go with your biology. Like you can do whatever you want. And I think that's the alternative. And I think people who are willing to just say, yeah, I think that's all it is. I don't think life has any meaning. I don't think there's good or evil, right or wrong. I think it's all just made up. I think there's an admirable courage in the willingness of those people to just face the void head on. Of course, in such a world, courage is no more objectively better than cowardice. So, their courage means nothing, but I still admire it. I think there's something to be admired in that honesty.
Yeah.
What I hate is the in-between, where people reject the idea that there's an objective morality and then still pretend like our moral concepts mean something. That's what I'm uncomfortable.
See, maybe you and I have just met different people, but quite often the people who do sort of embrace it nearly have an arrogance to them. It's like, if only you could grow up and get beyond these stupid concepts of good and evil. It's never quite that explicit, but it's like, I think a lot of these people have a very self-conscious view of themselves as courageous, as actually confronting the brute force of reality, more so than they actually really are courageous. It nearly becomes a point of pride for them.
Yeah, and a hilarious one at that, I suppose, because they have negated that courage means anything. So how are they taking pride in it?
Makes them feel good, and that's all life is. I will say, I don't know if you can hold to this view consistently, or that people typically do.
No, they don't. They use it conveniently, right? They say that patriarchy or heteronormativity are social constructs that can be left behind, but they do so in the name of other moral values like love or tolerance or compassion. And so I think we deconstruct values that we don't like by saying right and wrong are inventions, but then the deconstruction is usually done in the name of a different moral value that we still believe in.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. I mean, even beyond that, because maybe they'll bite the bullet on that. Why do we trust that there is an absolute right and wrong? Well, it's because nearly universally we all have a sense of this, and we disagree on some things, but there's some general alignment among most people. That's undeniable. But there are differences. And people will use these differences to undermine the idea that there is an absolute right and wrong answer. Well, who's to say that this culture is right and your culture, or this culture is wrong and your culture is right? And they'll ask that question, kind of using the idea that saying your culture is better is morally wrong, but nevertheless, they use it to undermine it. But at the same time, the very fact that people get things wrong, other cultures get things wrong. Other cultures get things wrong all the time. My culture gets things wrong all the time. Every culture gets things wrong. But what is nearly universal among these cultures, which is kind of funny, is the idea that there really is an absolute right and wrong answer to this, which is kind of funny. And so if we are to be consistent, right, and say, well, if people disagree, on something, therefore it's evidence that that's not real. Like if people disagree
What
on,
stands?
well, what stands, right? Well, I mean, I have a friend who's colorblind. Does that mean that the difference between red and green, which he struggles with, is fake? Or do we say, hey, no, you have color blindness, and that the normal view is to recognize these as distinct? We don't just throw up our hands and say, I guess there's no such thing as color differences.
Well, and I think, yeah, for sure. And I think it might be helpful because I think most people would say there's still an objective material scientific world. But if you talk to philosophers of science, which I think, Seth, you qualify as a philosopher of science, you'll get 5 different definitions of what energy is, but they all still agree energy is real, right? Like you'll get lots of different definitions of what the nature of reality. Yeah. You'll get very different views on what matter is, what it's made of, where, like, and yet they all still agree there is still something there. And so even in the hard sciences, you can have lots of different interpretations of a reality while still believing the reality itself is real. Am I overstepping here?
It's a loose parallel, but I get what you're getting at, right? Yeah. So, for instance, a lot of I think a better analogy might be species. What is it that makes something a different species from another species? It's like, well, zebras and horses are clearly a different species, but they can actually mate and produce an offspring. Well, that's interesting. Does that mean they're not different species? I mean, most species, if you try to interbreed them, nothing happens. And so there's actually like what? Oh, okay, good to know. So there's different definitions of what makes a species a species. There's actually like a dozen different definitions of a species. And yet, many scientists and many philosophers still think that there is something out there called a species, even though they just can't figure out what exactly it is. So this is the problem that confronts a lot of, I mean, it's kind of what you're pointing out, even in the sciences and the more hard sciences like physics and stuff like that. There are places where we find that where everyone can kind of agree that there is something out there, but even if there's disagreement on what that thing is. And just simply giving an origin to those beliefs, like I did with biology, doesn't undermine it.
Yeah, because you could give it an origin biologically to our belief in the material world, our belief, our reason. Like, why are we rational creatures? Oh, because it's our biology. Does that mean our reason can't be trusted? I think most of us would say no.
I think
right? I mean, there's a whole philosophical argument there, but like if you just discard things that can be originated from your biology as unreal, then you discard everything, right?
I think it's perfectly plausible to give an evolutionary account for the origin of belief in evolution.
Yeah. And so does that negate evolution?
Yeah, that'd be self-defeating if you said that, Yeah, I mean, in fact, it's not been through evolution, but there have been sociologists who talk about the reason people believed in Darwinism in Victorian-era Europe, survival of the fittest, really reinforced the aristocratic culture of that time. So that explains why it became very widespread and dominant. It's because, well, why did my family rise to the top? It's because we're more fit. Very sort of hierarchical society in Britain at the time. Now, regardless of the truth of that claim, let's just assume it's true for now. That doesn't mean that evolution, you can't use that to disprove evolution. Maybe you don't believe in evolution, but that's not an argument against evolution. That's the long story short. Explaining where a belief came from doesn't show that belief to be false. You have to take the evidences for that belief on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could come to believe a lot of different things because of some dubious origin or something like that. That doesn't mean the belief I've come to believe is false. And so just because maybe biology, we can explain the origin of why we have the certain moral codes that we do because of certain selection pressures in the past from evolution, doesn't mean that there are no such thing as absolute right and wrong. It's just what's called the genetic fallacy. Really,
sorry,
right now, John?
Alarm. My phone alarm is going off. Sorry, I have other things to do other than just podcasting.
How deeply immoral.
Sorry. Yeah, so I think you're tying a bow on it really nicely. Yes, we might disagree on what morality is from culture to culture, place to place, time to time. Some people might even think there is no morality, just as some people reject the claims of science, right? But that doesn't mean there's no reality there. And the fact that I think most people want to figure out what moral code is at the heart of the universe. Like, I think even if we disagree on what it is, I think people want there to be something there. There's something in us that makes us sense that there is. I think there's sort of a universality to that we would all try to claim there is something there. We're all trying to figure out what it is, even if we disagree on how to define it. And, I think some people might say that love is the unifying thing across them, even though different cultures define love different. Love. I mean, different cultures will define love differently. Love for family, love for country, love for self, love for other. Like, there's differences, of course, in those definitions, but is some shred of love manifesting across the board? And even if you could find some culture or place where it isn't, does that negate the existence of love any more than the fact that there are people who reject basic truths about the world, and whole cultures that reject truths about the world? That doesn't mean there are no truths about the world, right? So I think to reject your moral instincts for the reasons that we've listed would end up meaning you have to reject a whole lot of other things as well that most people don't reject.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I said I don't think people do it consistently. I don't think you could believe in a lot of things. If you hold to the same level of skepticism about your morals, and not just your very particular morals, but that there are absolute right and wrongs, if you hold to the same skepticism of that as you do everything, you begin to start cutting away at some pretty well-established beliefs that you really don't see a lot of people do. Unless they just go full-on, complete postmodern relativists and just say, yeah, there is no truth. And I've met a couple of those people, and applause for them for their consistency.
Yeah, but what is consistency in a truthless world?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. They're still worshiping coherence. So I think there's this instinct that most people have that morality is there. I think the reasons to reject that instinct aren't as good as people think they are.
Should we call it an instinct, or should we call it an intuition, maybe?
An intuition, sure. Yeah, instincts maybe too.
Because that still sounds like it's just biological. It's just an instinct, right?
Yeah. So I think, is there an objective morality? I don't know if we can absolutely prove that there is, but I think, I think that I think there would need to be for any of our moral concepts to matter. And if you want to just say they don't matter, then okay. But if you still want love to be better than hate, then you can continue tracking with this conversation and we'll see where it goes now.
Yeah. All right. So there is this objective morality. Let's just grant it. And in fact, most philosophers do. By every statistic that I've read, poll of philosophers, most philosophers do believe there is an absolute right and wrong. Regardless of any other belief, they do believe that. So what is this objective morality? Okay, so it's out there somewhere. What's it like? Tell us about it, John.
Well, I think for it to be objective and to not just be something that, is subjective, I think it would have to have 6 qualities. And these are the qualities I end up describing in the book, The Journey of God. And if you have a problem with my self-promotion and you don't believe in morality, then what's your problem? Yeah, you have a whole podcast. But also, what's wrong with self-promoting in a meaningless world? So in my book, I kind of lay out, okay, if there is this thing called objective morality, if it's not just my invention, if it's not just my society's invention, if it's not just something that biology and evolution tricked me into believing, but it's something that is objectively right and wrong in a more absolute sense, what must that morality be like? What must be its shape, and like what must it be grounded in? And I say that the moral source of all things must have 6 qualities. The first one I would say is, of course, that it is morality. So it is the moral lawgiver. But what I mean by that is it can't just be something that invents goodness. It has to be goodness itself. It can't just be another source like Zeus and Athena debating which law to give humanity. It has to somehow not just be an invention of morality, but has to somehow be goodness itself. And you know what? Just cut this. I didn't say this correctly. You can just cut this. Should I just keep going?
Yeah.
No? Just keep going. Okay, you're going to leave this in now and make me look stupid.
Yes.
Yes, okay. I think what I'm really getting at is it has to be eternal. This goodness itself, this moral order, it can't be something invented or that begins to exist in time. Because if it begins to exist, then it's something somebody constructed. It's something that began to exist at some point in the past. And if morality is just something that was invented or began to exist, then why can't we invent a different morality? Any morality that is born in time can be overcome in time and replaced with a different morality invented in time. And so I think we have to say that if morality is objective, it also has to be eternal. It can't be something that changes from place to place. It can't be that love is good in one place and hate is good in another, that love is good in one place and genocide is good in the other. Like love needs to be love eternally. Goodness needs to be goodness eternally, or else it's subjective and relative to time and place. And so I would argue the first attribute that this morality must have is that it's eternal. It's grounded in something that has always existed and doesn't begin to exist, or else morality is just something that was invented, and let's invent our own. Just like the rules of a board game. Are the rules of a board game absolute? No, you can play by whatever rules you want if you want to, because at some point someone invented the rules of Monopoly. So if your family wants to invent different rules and use the same board, you haven't violated any absolute code because the rules of Monopoly are also made up, right? So that's the first thing. Morality must be eternal,
We're not
grounded
playing
in something
board games
eternal.
at Christmas, just so you know. After that little diatribe of yours,
I don't even think we're seeing you at Christmas.
are you not?
We tried to the plan was to come down at Christmas, and I think your parents nixed it.
Good. More
Yeah.
board games for me.
Anyways, I think the first thing is this source of morality must be eternal. It can't begin to exist. It can't change. It has to always be what it is. Love is objectively, eternally better than hate. Now, what do you think of that, Seth? Would you agree? Disagree? I mean, I know what you're going to do, but why don't you supplement it? Because I think I sort of sputtered all over the place there, and you can
here's
kind of
my
fix...
question to try and poke a hole, right? Why does it have to be eternal? I mean, the whole point is it's just that it's objective. That it's out there and it has some sort of weight upon us. Yes, it might change in the future, but that doesn't mean it's not objective. So, I mean, why not? Why can't it just be out there, impose itself upon us as real morality, and then it might change in the future? That doesn't make it less objective. It just means it's not eternal. Morality could change.
Yeah, and I think I would say that if that's the case, then if someone wanted to, as the Nazis wanted to do, take control of morality and kill off everyone who didn't fit into their moral ethical code, and if they'd really succeeded and done it for long enough, they really could have embedded into our biology an objective, non-individual subject
Well, that would
notion
change our
that what
biology,
they-
but it wouldn't change the objective morals out there.
Well, I think, oh, so you're saying the objective morals out there can change? I mean,
Yeah, why not?
I think it can't change.
Why?
Not in the sense that we want. I think the sense of morality that most of us have is that love has to always be better than hate. And if love can be objective but not eternal in the sense that you're saying, then it can also be replaced by a morality of hate. And that can also be objective. And so that would then be the good thing, is to hate. And if that's what you mean by morality, I think that's just not... I just don't think that's really moral. I just don't think that provides the framework
Well, it's
that
not
I think
moral
we mean when we say moral.
by the morals that impose themselves on us, but maybe there's a different morality for maybe some future beings, that aren't human, that are different from ours. And I'm not saying they're purely biological, and I'm not saying you could go out there and change them, but maybe they can be changed, maybe not by us, but by something. They could be changed.
And I think
like if
I'm
God
open to the
tomorrow
fact that
wanted to change the 10 Commandments and add an 11th one, couldn't God change morality?
So I would say that it's possible we'll encounter a species that has a different moral vision than us. It's not that I can't fathom that. It's that if their morality is actually good and ours is also good and they contradict, then It's just like
one is
I think
objectively
it's I
good
think
for
it's
us, one's objectively good for them. It's kind of like, eating insects raw isn't good for me, but it is good for a praying mantis.
yeah. I guess I would just say that that is relative in an absolute sense.
But it's also objective. Like, it is objectively true that
I think
eating.
it's objective in the sense that it's not just you who's coming up with it, it's your species as a whole. But your species' vision of reality is not itself objective
Well,
because
I'm
it's
not. I think
relative
no. There might
compared
be
to another species.
It's not your species coming up with it. It's I didn't come up with the fact that eating insects is bad for me. That is an objective, out there fact about humans, right?
Okay, you're arguing too well for your side. So just switch because I know you know how to solve the just I know that you're wrong, but I'm having trouble trying to articulate it. Just solve the problem so we can move on.
I'll just drop the point. I'm just really trying to poke holes in this.
No, solve the point. Just solve it. You got to solve it for us.
Well, so what I would say is it would really depend on the source of this morality. Is it something grounded in just our nature? Or is it, something eternal out there? What I would say is, what we would want to say is for humans. I think we can make our case a little bit more restricted. We could say for humans, for people of our certain kind of nature, because morality is grounded in who we are as beings. It makes no logical sense to say morality could shift for us, because it isn't just some arbitrary thing out there. It's a reflection of who we are as human beings, that we are oriented towards goodness. So it becomes a logical impossibility in that sense. So that's what I'm saying. I do think it's eternal in one sense, but I don't think it's eternal. I want to just kind of point out that it's because of who we are that morality is the way it is. It's because we are creatures fundamentally oriented towards the good, which is your first point. That it becomes
let me maybe
eternally
rephrase
true
it.
for us.
A species like humans might begin to exist. And what it means to live the good life for a human is different from what it means to live the good life for a dog or for a different species.
Yes.
But there's only an objectively good definition of what it means to be human and of what it means to be good if you assume there's a higher source of eternal goodness itself that manifests differently in human contexts and dog contexts and alien contexts. But in order to say what is good for aliens, what is good for dogs, and what is the good life for humans, you still have to assume there's a word good there that does transcend those cultural situations.
Yeah.
And that goodness is still goodness universally for all, and not just for one species or another. And so even if you're admitting there's a certain cultural or species relativity, you still have to insist that living within that relativity implies that you still believe there is a thing called goodness itself that transcends those contexts.
Sure. And I'm done trying to poke holes. I'm just trying to really push you.
You're just trying to be a dick, and I get it. You're a. I mean that with. So I think the first one is this morality must be eternal, and I think that allows a second attribute that this morality could have, which is it could potentially be the creator. And why do I say that? Well, if it's eternal, it doesn't begin to exist. It's uncaused. It's always existed. And my sense is that most, if our universe needs a cause of it, right? And so what caused it? Because we're in time. We begin to exist. The universe began 14 billion years ago. It's not eternal, empirically. So it began to exist. It needs a cause of its existence. And those causes can just keep going back. What caused the cause that caused the cause? And eventually you're going to have to hit something that's uncaused, something that isn't within time and so doesn't need a cause of its existence, but has always been. And so if you admit that morality is eternal, if it's objective, it must be grounded in something eternal, then that thing can provide ground zero for all that comes after. And so can be the source of all that comes to exist. It doesn't need a cause of its existence because it's eternal. And if it's eternal, then it makes sense that it could be the source from which all other things spring. And so this moral source is not only eternal, but plausibly the creator of all that comes after it.
So you're not saying It has to be. You're just saying it potentially could be.
Perhaps there are other things that exist that are timeless and eternal and uncaused, and those are the sources of all reality. But, Occam's razor, I don't think we encounter many things, if any things, that are eternal. So if we are to come across one and have this strong instinct that it's there, it's very plausible, if not probable, that it is the source of all things that follow. Because in order to end the infinite regress, we need an uncaused cause. We need something that's eternal and that doesn't itself need an explanation.
So it seems like it's
if
built...
this provides that, then you have it. You have the source of all reality. You have an eternal thing.
Yeah, it sounds like, though, you're basing it on Occam's razor, where you don't want one eternal moral law and another eternally existing creator.
I'm saying, I'm not saying it has to be the creator, as I think you pointed out. I'm saying, okay, but how many of these eternal sources of reality are we going to postulate here? And I think it's a crazy thing to postulate even one, and it's only the moral instinct that makes me do so. And so, if you're going to postulate, what caused the universe? I don't know. It just keeps going back and back. And if we don't have any eternal source, we don't have an answer to the question. But if morality is pointing us to something eternal, then hey, that provides an answer to the question. Maybe there are other answers to the question we haven't thought of, but it's very plausible that this would be the eternal source that creates the world.
Okay, so, hold that tentatively, because, the law of, moral laws are not themselves causal. I wasn't created by the law to love your neighbor as yourself.
Love doesn't birth all things?
You might mean that metaphorically true, but it's tough to imagine that a moral abstract law, like don't steal from your neighbor, created me, So
we're actually going to get into this in a minute.
Plausible, but right now it feels like we have to hold this loosely.
Yes. And I would say, to some extent, it's the weakest premise in the whole argument.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay. I would say the third thing this moral thing must be, in order to be objective and absolute, is non-physical. Because physical things are susceptible to change. Even atoms can be split. Matter changes, it grows, it withers. Just look at our eyes. They are starting to wrinkle because we are mere material beings of flesh. We exist within time. All material things can be changed, altered, grow, age, all of those types of things. And so I think that if goodness is to be real, I don't think it's like a material object out there. I don't think it can be susceptible to the material change of matter and time and space. And so I would say it must be non-physical.
Yeah, this one makes sense in the sense that the law to love your neighbor as yourself isn't a thing, isn't a physical thing. It's not like I can go out there and say, there's that law. It's sitting right there, It's not it's non-physical. That just seems like the very nature of what we're talking about, that moral laws, kind of like legal laws, aren't physical things. There might be a legal document that talks about that law and maybe instantiates it, but the law itself isn't that piece of paper. It's something that exists culturally, in the same way that these moral laws, if they're really out there, they're non-physical.
Well, and I think also if you define the physical world as the source of goodness itself, that you're immediately facing an empirical problem, because the physical world has a whole lot of evil in it, right? People, like physical beings killing other physical beings, death, all this sort of stuff. So we need a source, a definition of goodness that's higher than the physical, because the physical can't be the source of what is right and wrong. It can't be goodness itself because it's got a lot of evil in it, right? The source has to be higher than the physical universe, because the universe is both good and evil.
Sure, right.
Makes sense?
We judge physical states based on something higher. It ought not be the case. What?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that then points to the fourth point. Are you ready to move on?
Yeah, go ahead. Fourth point. Are we on 5? We have goodness, eternal, creator, non-physical, and this would be point 5, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So I guess the
I'm keeping
first
up.
one wasn't that it was eternal. It's just that it's the source of it's morality itself. It's goodness itself.
Wow.
So it's the lawgiver.
Okay.
So the fifth point would be that whatever this source of morality is, it has to be mental. Not mental in the sense that you're mental, but in the sense that it's not a physical thing, but a mental thing. And what I mean by that is that, like, the idea of goodness, of right and wrong, that's not, as you said before, an object out there in the world. It's not like if you just travel far enough to Andromeda, you're going to find morality sitting on a hill somewhere, right? Because goodness is not a physical object out there in the world. It's an idea. It's a concept. It's a notion. And where do ideas exist? In minds. And so if goodness is an idea, not an object, it makes sense that it wouldn't exist as something floating out there, but as a mind, as an idea in a mind.
So
it seems more mental than material.
I mean, so here's the thing, though. I mean, can't moral laws be kind of like natural laws? In the way like the law of gravity or E equals MC squared. Like these are like universal truths that affect everything. Because everything is gravity, E equals MC squared. That's a formula that affects everything. But we're not saying that those are like someone's out there thinking E equals MC squared. Or are we committing ourselves to saying that?
Well, I think you actually do think something like that, don't you?
I do? I'm asking you, Jonathan.
Yeah, so, I mean, what I just did by putting the moral law as mental, as locating it basically in the mind of God, I think if we're just being honest about what it is the classical move that St. Augustine made with Plato's forms. The forms don't exist hovering out there in nowhere. They exist in the mind of God. And I think the religious person can say that the scientific laws of the universe are precisely those forms in action. That it's precisely because there is a mental structure or logic to reality that points us back to the one who is the logos, logic itself.
So why not
because
just...
I don't know if material things can make sense of the laws that reign over them. How can you make sense of absolute laws in material? Like, imagine that matter is just a bunch of Lego pieces. How do you get laws governing those material Lego pieces just through putting enough of them together? There already has to be a mental structure that exists before the matter itself.
But why not just say that these laws exist kind of like a brute fact? I mean, eventually reality has to bottom out somewhere. So why not just say that, yeah, there are these moral laws and they just exist and we have access to them?
Because they can be violated.
They can be, but maybe that's just part of the brute fact, that it is a moral law that one ought not to do it. But ought implies can, right? That in cannot.
The natural universe is the laws of what is. I can't violate gravity. I can
I'm not
jump.
saying it is a natural law. I'm saying it's a moral law. It's something different that we can violate. Why not just say that there are these moral laws out there that we can violate and they just exist?
Well, that's what I'm saying is it's already distinguished from natural law in that you can violate it.
Sure.
And so you've already made a distinction from natural laws. You're already saying this is something that doesn't fit into our usual scientific picture of reality. Because the laws of gravity cannot be violated. These, like, that you can jump, but then it pulls you back down. You're not violating it, you're fitting into it. And so the scientific laws of the universe are not violatable. And I think I would also say... Sorry, you meant to say something?
Well, I mean, I don't think anyone who claims this, and this is a common claim, Platonic moral realism in philosophy, that there are these laws out there that exist, either by a necessity of their own nature, as a brute fact, different explanations of these. And yet, nevertheless, there is this idea that, yeah, there just are these moral laws. It is wrong to steal from your neighbor for your own selfish gain. And are they different from natural laws? Yeah, no one is claiming that they are the same as natural laws. Can they be violated? Yeah, that's kind of what morality is. It's, morality isn't something that's forced upon you. It's something that you have to align with. And so I just don't see that as a problem for the position. I think it's part of the position.
I would say two things. First of all, again, I think the logical laws of the universe that you're trying to compare morality to, I think those themselves point to a mental source of all things. And the way that I might say that, and I'll use a thought experiment here, before the physical universe existed, before the material universe banged into being, is it possible, did it exist? And yeah, now let me ask, is it possible that it existed before it existed?
No.
Because it couldn't both exist and not exist at the same time,
Sure.
right? And so logic dictates that the material universe can't exist when it doesn't exist. And so even before the universe existed, it couldn't already exist, which means that you believe logic reigns even if there's no material universe over which to reign, and that logic is more foundational to reality than the material world itself, and can be conceptually distinguished from it, such that before there is a material universe, logic is already there, dictating that the universe can't exist before it exists. And so I would say that very much points to something that's non-material, but mental, or at least a form in the Platonic sense. And my sense is that you can't have disembodied ideas. You can't have logic floating out there somewhere, because logic is an idea. It's a concept, a notion, not a thing. And where do ideas and concepts exist? In minds, which is why Platonism is always the most rational when it's combined with religion, when these forms or logical structures are placed in an absolute mind, which is eternally thinking them and structuring reality according to those thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a
So I would say,
I think that's a
go
stronger
ahead.
point. Yeah, I think that's a stronger point, which is the idea the idea that these moral laws exist as brute facts. It's difficult for me to think of them as existing by necessity. Just they have to exist. I don't why. You know, it's fully plausible to think that maybe there aren't any moral values. Someone's not completely irrational in thinking that. And yet, why do they exist? Well, they exist as brute facts, and brute facts I feel like in philosophy should only be appealed to. They just exist. They just exist. You only do that whenever there's like you don't have another option. I feel like that it's sort of like waving a white flag at the problem. Quite often it becomes that. And yet, you know, and at the same time, I kind of just don't know what it means to think that like moral laws just exist. Justice exists. What does that mean?
Goodness exists. Love exists.
Yeah.
Apart from a material world? What?
Goodness, you know, justice, mercy exists. What does that mean? I don't know what exists, even what that term exists means there, unless it subsists in some being, in something. You know, so to me, it's far more plausible. Even if Platonic moral realism is true, I don't see it as the most plausible option.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And even if someone doesn't want to call it God, if you're talking about goodness and love as these eternal things that exist at the heart of the universe, that's a religious inclination. That is transcendence. It might not be God in the sense of, oh, I'm Zeus throwing a lightning bolt, but it's very much close to the I am God that Jews and Christians and Muslims, and I think that Hindu notions of Brahman have been getting at the whole time. But again, I think it makes the most sense to frame those ideas of love and goodness in a mind that they're eternal thoughts in, because they're ideas. Love is not a thing out there. Justice is not an object. It's a concept or an idea. And where do concept or ideas exist? In minds. So if love and justice and goodness exist eternally, it makes the most sense that they would be grounded and existing eternally in an eternal mind. But I think there's one more step to be taken here that distinguishes the moral laws from even those scientific rational laws. And even if you couldn't make that distinction, I think we still have you can still claim that those things require God. But I think it's helpful anyway. The sixth attribute that this eternal source of goodness and morality must have is that it's personal. And why do I say that? Well, the impersonal laws of the universe, the laws of gravity, act indifferently on all things. But morality only acts on the hearts of personal beings. And what I mean is this: if I drop a piano on someone, gravity dictates that it will fall down, right? And gravity acts on the piano. But if I jump off of a plane, I'll also fall down, right? Because gravity acts on all things. A rock falls down, I fall down, the planets go around. The scientific law of gravity acts indifferently and impersonally upon all things that exist, right? But morality doesn't work that way. Morality doesn't act as a law upon all things, but only upon personal things. If I stone someone to death, I'll feel morally guilty about it, but the stone doesn't feel anything at all. Because the moral law is not an impersonal law like the scientific laws that act upon all things indifferently. No, it acts only on personal beings, like humans and persons. And if you want to include dogs or dolphins in that personal category, you can. But it's precisely because they are personal that they're getting this moral instinct or intuition. And so the moral law is different from the scientific laws of the universe because those apply indifferently and impersonally to all things, whereas the moral law only acts on persons. The moral law is personal.
Yeah, so let's be clear here, though. You're talking about the objects of moral laws are personal. But how do you jump to say that the source of moral laws is personal?
Well, I think you could say that you never know whether what you're attributing to the universe is in here or actually out there, right? I mean, that's a problem for everything. Is the universe rational, or am I just rational and I'm imposing my rational framework onto the universe? Do time and space really exist, Kant? Or is my mind just temporal and spatial and I see things that way?
I'm not saying that.
So
maybe I should be clear. I'm not saying we're imposing something onto the world. I'm saying that you're very right that moral laws presuppose an object that is personal. In order to say you should love your neighbor as yourself, you're talking about persons here. Who are responding to this. My curiosity then is like, well, you've done a good job proving that the objects of moral laws need to be personal, but where are we getting this idea then to jump to say that the source needs to be a personal agent?
I don't know if it's a logical necessity, but I think it's a plausible conclusion. I think it makes sense to say that if this thing that's called love and goodness itself is making demands only on personal beings, it has some sort of vested interest in the personal, and that there must be something in itself that causes it to act that way. Because something's actions, or the things that it acts upon others, tends to say something about the thing itself. And so I would say that if this thing is acting in a personal way and impacting personal entities rather than non-personal ones, there must be something about it that causes it to do that. That can't just be a complete coincidence. It must in some way be traced back to the source, who must have the personal in some way within itself. Does that mean it's only personal? I don't think it needs to mean that it's only personal, but there must be something personal in the cause if we're going to see something personal in the effect, or else like isn't causing like, and there's just a disconnect between cause and effect, source and product. Just like I create kids who are like me, right? Well, they don't have to be like their parents, but how could I make something that wasn't like myself?
Yeah, I mean, but we're not saying that the source is personal is creating persons. We're saying the source is creating actually non-personal, abstract laws, so to speak. And so there actually is a disconnect there. So in a way, you're not saying that personal agent is making me. You're saying they're making these abstract moral laws, which then affect me. I mean, I can keep pushing on this when we're running out of time.
Yeah,
but I get what you're saying. It's plausible.
I think you have a point that it's not an absolutely necessary conclusion in the way that 2 + 2 does not, like 2 + 2 has to equal 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the source of personal laws does not have to be personal in that 2 + 2 = 4 way. but I think it's plausible and I think it's persuasive. It's weird that there are personal laws that only apply to persons, and it's definitely if such a thing exists, it doesn't make sense in our current scientific materialistic framework. I think we could definitely say that.
Yeah, so it's goodness itself, eternal, creator, non-physical, mental, and perhaps personal. So perhaps personal, perhaps creator. Those are the ones we're kind of like, okay.
Unusually vested in the personal. How about that?
See, vested nearly sounds personal, so it sounds like you're smuggling it in.
Oh, I 100% am.
Yeah, of course you are. Okay.
So and I think this is a cumulative case. I don't think any one of these things on their own proves that God must be the source of morality. I think it's a cumulative case because, okay, if this thing that is goodness and love itself is also eternal and plausibly the creator and non-physical and it's mental, it's mind, not matter, and it's somehow unusually invested in the personal, and it has something of the personal about it. It's not just an abstract law of the universe like the scientific laws. There's something personal in its way. Then you've decided something that is goodness itself, eternal, creator, non-physical, mental, and personal. And even if you don't want to call that God, you're basically ascribing to what everyone who believes in God believes, even if you call it by a different name. And so I think that we're definitely looking at a religious view of the universe here, and certainly not a scientific materialistic one. Even if you don't want to call it God, I think this requires us to go beyond what most atheistic, materialistic, naturalistic views of the universe would allow.
Yeah, I mean, if you get rid of the personal and the creator, which are the two that we're like, well, we can't really prove that, then you have eternal, non-physical, and mental. And
which I already argued, I think does not work on an. I think Platonism works the best when it's combined with religion.
I think that's probably where you, if you want to say that this is best explained by God, you should probably lean into say the idea of just abstract moral laws floating around. They're not really floating around, but just sort of existing. Is not nearly as a plausible hypothesis as the theistic one, as the fact that these are grounded in the very nature and being of God.
Well, and then atheists are having to postulate that there are these invisible, immaterial, absolute things that are eternal and that you can't see or touch or scientifically experiment on. And even if that isn't God, they're already granting all of the premises that they mock in religion. And so, even if that source isn't God itself, you're postulating something that has all the attributes of God. And so why do you accept it for that, but you dismiss it when it comes to God? I mean, I think there's something there.
Yeah, so let's clarify before we get to the end here. Are you, Jonathan, saying that therefore, to be a good human being, you must believe in God? Yes.
Not at all. I think there's lots of Christians that are really doing sadistic, evil, sick, abusive stuff, and there are atheists
you see one in the mirror every morning,
fighting. Yeah, I do, and I think there are atheists out there who are fighting the good fight, trying to cure cancer, trying to solve poverty and homelessness. Totally, completely, because the argument here has never been that you need to believe in God in order to be a good person. Rather, the argument has been that if God does not exist, there is no such thing as goodness itself. So, if God does not exist, then both atheists and religion, it doesn't impact whether you as an individual are a good person or not. It impacts whether the term goodness has any objective meaning.
Right.
And so those are very different conversations. And you don't have to believe in gravity in order to stay on the ground. And so likewise, you don't have to believe in God. And you don't have to believe in one who is absolute goodness itself in order to be good. But when you are being good, are you not reflecting that thing, even if you don't believe in it? Just as the person who doesn't know about gravity is still stuck on the ground, even if they don't know why and don't believe in something called gravity. So that it's very different from whether you can be good. Do you have to be good? Do you have to believe in God to be good? No. But does God have to exist for goodness itself to mean anything? And I would argue, I think the most plausible explanation of goodness itself existing, of something that is goodness, eternal, creator, non-physical, mental, and personal, the most plausible explanation is God. And I think the only reason you would reject that is if you have already assumed and swallowed whole a culture that's atheistic and you just want to cling on to it. But it's certainly not where the argument and the philosophy leads you. I think the most plausible outcome is God.
Yeah. And the more I think about it, the more I think, yeah, there has to be an absolute right and wrong. So if you are a good person, be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a 5-star review. And if you want proof that there is absolute evil in the world, Journey of God, available on Amazon.com.
You're such a... I don't even know if you promoted it, so I guess I'm not mad. You brought it up. But all press is good press, but geez.